Members of the jury, the state does not get to choose which victims it protects. It protects everybody. Miss Alexander, however, got to choose her victim. She got to choose to shoot him 4 times in the groin. She chose to watch him bleed for 10 whole minutes. And then Miss Alexander chose to shoot him again. What happened that night? Mr. Alexander, Chris Alexander, was not a great guy. See, he had cheated on Miss Alexander, his wife, several times, and she knew about it. In fact, the entire neighborhood did. Mr. Alexander was also involved with drugs. So when Mr. Alexander came home that night, he was on the phone with Nikki Long, a mistress of his who he had gotten pregnant earlier that year. He came home, he entered his home, he turned off the alarm system, took off his shirt, took off his shoes, turned the television on, and walked over to the kitchen area. Nikki Long is going to tell you that Chris got off the phone with her in a hurry that night. Miss Alexander wanted to kill him. You see, Miss Alexander and Mr. Alexander had gone about 6 months ago to get insurance, life insurance for Mr. Alexander. In the event of his death, Miss Alexander would be paid $250,000. Miss Alexander waited for him when he got home that night. She came out of her bedroom and she shot him in the groin. She was angry that he had cheated on her. She watched him bleed for 10 minutes. 10 whole minutes went by before she decided to finish him off and shoot him in the chest, just to ensure that he was dead. Miss Alexander then stood up. She went over to her home invasion intrusion alarm and she set it. And then she opened the door. Because she figured by then she didn't have to call the cops. But the ADT is going to call. And they're going to send the police for her. So she could get prepared. She hid the murder weapon. Picked up some shell casings. And staged herself next to her husband when the police arrived. See, Miss Alexander hadn't been entirely truthful with the police when they arrived either. In fact, one of the officers is going to testify today that Miss Alexander lied about owning a weapon. It wasn't until the officer found a gun holster next to her bed that Miss Alexander testified, told the officer, "Oh, that's right, I have a gun. It's in the laundry room." Mr. Alexander, in fact, owned 2 weapons. 9mm that Miss Alexander showed the cops, and the 45mm that she hid from the cops, that she used to kill him. The officer noticed a pack of Benadryl next to her on the kitchen table. When Miss Alexander was asked about that, she says that the children were sick. They didn't wake up to the gunshots because they were sick. They had taken 8 pills of Benadryl to get through the night. Miss Alexander murdered her husband that night. And she had planned to do it when the time was right. 6 months after life insurance policy came in, she wouldn't be suspected. Miss Alexander hid the murder weapon. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, your job today is to sift through all this evidence and decide what is credible to you. You're going to find that Miss Alexander's story just doesn't add up. But it does if she was the one that killed Mr. Alexander. I am confident by the end of this that you will find, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Miss Alexander actually murdered her husband that night to watch him suffer for what he had done to her.